Welcome back. It's Sunday. It's a great day to worship God, and I hope you've taken a few minutes today, or if you're not watching this on Sunday, I hope you've taken a few minutes this week to really think about what God has done for you, to praise Him for the blessings that He's given to you, and just thank Him for who He is, recognizing who He is in creation, recognizing His sovereignty over every situation, over our life. But I hope that that's been the case for you. I hope that you've continued to study the Bible as we have been in this COVID-19 lockdown for quite some time now. This morning, we're going to look at Mark chapter 15. It's the second to last chapter in the book of Mark. And things like brutality, injustice, innocence, humiliation, there are all themes that go as part of this chapter. Matter of fact, when you read this chapter alongside some of the commentaries and things, this is probably one of the most depressing chapters in the Bible. And I think that, like a video game maybe that you've played too much, or a movie you've seen far too many times, it is easy to get numb to what this passage actually deals with and what it explains. Especially for those of you that have grown up around church, or you've been in it a long time, we hear this particular story frequently, the story of Jesus being killed. And it's easy for us to become used to that story and to miss the gravity that's behind it. So as we go into this morning, I want you to remember the fact that this did not happen on a movie set somewhere. This was not done with CGI. This happened to a real person in a real time at a real place, and has far-reaching implications for you, for me, for the entire world that's lived from that point until now. This person endured horrific things simply because he cared about you. You can say, well, Brad, did he know about me? Yes, he did. He's omniscient. He's the God of all creation. He knew about you. And while he did this for you, he did this for everybody else. And so I want you to stop this video, take a couple minutes and read Mark chapter 15. It's a longer chapter. So if you got to take a little time to do it, please do it, because it's incredibly important. When you finish with that, come back and hang out with us and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching this morning. So as we get into Mark chapter 15, I just want to give you a quick recap of this story, because there's a lot of things happening here. In the first 5 verses, you've got Jesus going to Pilate, who was the Roman governor at the time. So remember, where we left off in chapter 14, Jesus was before the council, which was Jewish religious leaders, and they had accused Jesus and condemned him to die, but they didn't have any authority to put him to death. Only the Roman authorities could do that. So they ship him over to Pilate. Pilate goes through a bunch of things in verses 6 through 15, and ultimately delivers Jesus up to be executed. In verses 16 through 20, we have the story of Jesus being beaten and mocked and ridiculed by the Roman guards that were going to be his executioners. In verse 21 through 32, you've got the story of his actual crucifixion, where they take him out of the city and they nail him to a cross. It's incredibly gruesome. And when you do any research into this, you'll understand just how brutal this was. And I encourage you to do that. When you look at verse 33 through 41, you've got the story of when Jesus surrenders his life. He gives it up. They didn't kill him. Well, I mean, they did kill him, but he didn't. He chose to go this route, if you get what I'm saying here. He chose to allow this stuff to happen to him. And so we see that at this point, God turns his back on Jesus, which is an incredibly pivotal moment in this entire story. And in verse 42 to the end in 47, you have the burial of Jesus, where certain people go and get his body, they dress it for burial, and they place it inside of a grave. And so that's, in a nutshell, what happens here in Mark chapter 15. And I want to focus on a couple things, because I don't know, for myself and when I've talked to the people in the past, the question that often comes up, well, is why does he have to do this? If he's God, why can't he just, clean the slate and do what he's going to do? And it's a valid question when you consider it. But when you look at this and the whole thing of what God is trying to do here, and the whole presence of sin and suffering, and the whole purpose behind God's plan for the world, it's simply this: someone had to die in order for atonement, which we've talked about before, or the penalty for someone's sins to be taken away. And the only person who could possibly do that and make it apply to the entire world that was then living and everybody that was going to come after that point, which would be you and me, the only way for that to happen was for Jesus to do it. Jesus was the one person in the world who didn't deserve death. He was the one person who didn't deserve any of the treatment that he got. And consequently, he was the only person that could make the difference for the rest of us. Romans chapter 5 sums it up the best in verse number 17. It says this, Let me read it. For if because of one man's trespass, death reigned through that one man, speaking about Adam in the book of Genesis, much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ. Therefore, as one trespass led to condemnation for all men, so one act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. Now, again, if you're reading this and you're a girl, the Bible just uses men to refer to everybody, so please don't be offended by that. But last verse here, verse 19, for as by one man's sin, disobedience, or by one man's disobedience, the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience, the many will be made righteous. And he goes on and kind of further lay this out. But in other words, the only person that could fix what was broken was Jesus. The only person who could fix the mistakes that Adam had made several thousand years before Jesus comes on the scene was Jesus. From that moment when Adam sinned, the entire world is controlled by sin and death. Well, from the time that Jesus allows himself to be killed and then comes back from the dead in Mark chapter 16, and when that happens, the world is no longer ruled by sin and death. The world has an opportunity to escape that. And that's the message that's here. And so if you think about it this way, the only person in the world who didn't deserve to die for his actions did so willingly so that you could have your life. He gave up his life so that you could have yours. Now, this action that he does makes him worthy of all of our worship, our praise, our honor, our glory. And we'll talk about those things over the next few weeks, I'm sure. But again, if we look at Romans chapter 15 in verse number 6, it says this, for while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. And what's awesome about these verses is a couple things that if we hope in Jesus, we have the freedom really to live life without the guilt and the shame and even the consequences of our mistakes and our actions. I know for a fact that every single person in the world that's living now has done something wrong. And I think if we're being honest, maybe this time at home that we've had hasn't been the greatest, because often when we're by ourselves and we're bored, it's easier to fall into some of the traps that maybe have caught us before. What he's talking about right here in this passage is that because of the sacrifice of Jesus, the death of Christ on our behalf, we are no longer bound by the guilt of those things, the consequences of those things, like our eternal consequences of those things, or the shame of that. That feeling in the pit of your stomach when you do something wrong and you just feel awful, that goes away when it comes to relationship with Christ. It's forgiveness, it's mercy, it's grace, all wrapped up into one shell. In essence, Jesus has given you a new life through his death. Matter of fact, other parts of Scripture talk about that, how we're a new creation, we're a new creature. We're no longer defined by those things. We're no longer owned by those things. But if you think about it, you've been free. You're now free to leave all of the garbage behind that owned your life. Everything that you thought would make you happy but didn't no longer owns you, and you don't have to keep working that direction anymore. If you think about it, that's really how humans work, isn't it? We put all of our hope, all of our stock, all of our energy into accomplishing something, being a certain type of person, looking a certain way, feeling a certain way. But inevitably, something happens and that gets taken from us. A lot of that happened with COVID, with everything that's going on right now, right? We tried to make ourselves into these people that we wanted to be, and then this stuff came down, and now we're stuck at home, and nobody cares anymore, right? And a lot of times we hit that point, we realize what we've been working for has been taken away. We're often in a worse place than when we started. And we're dealing with emotions and things that's like, wow, I can't believe this let me down. A lot of people take that and get bitter. A lot of people find that and get incredibly hopeless, and there's other consequences to that are awful. It doesn't really matter where that sits. Christ and his death on the cross frees us from all of that, because the only place we're going to find happiness and fulfillment that lasts is in a relationship with God, back in harmony with the one who made us into the people that we are, and we are able to restore back something that was lost back with Adam. I think that through the death of Jesus, we're reoriented into this relationship with God where all that matters is recognizing God for who he is and living life in a way that makes him happy. That's it. It's simple. I don't know about you, but I love simple things. When you can boil everything down to one and that's it. But Jesus' death on the cross gives us a path to have a relationship with God where you can be happy in spite of everything that's happening, where you can have purpose even when it feels like the world is going absolutely insane. I want to finish off this morning with this, that I think that that someone gave up their life so that you could have yours back. Even though you may not even know what you lost in the first place, it's going to be a whole new thing for you. But things like lust, greed, image, likability, whatever has you as a slave right now, if you have a relationship with Christ, you've been set free from that. It no longer owns you. And all of that comes back to Jesus' death, his sacrifice of his life on the cross. So the question is this morning, how are you going to honor that sacrifice? If you're watching this morning, you say, Brad, I don't have a relationship with God, or hey, I made a decision when I was a little kid and I didn't get it, or I did it because I felt like I had to, but I don't really understand this. I want to talk to you, or better yet, I have some awesome leaders from my church that would love to talk with you if you're not comfortable talking with me. At the end of the day, I want you to understand the fact that Jesus did everything that he did in Mark chapter 15 because he loves you and he cares about you, and he wants you to live a life that is so much better than what you have right now. So the question is, how are you going to honor that sacrifice? Thanks for watching this morning. I hope that you have a great rest of your week. Stay tuned on Instagram for our stuff that'll be popping up in the evenings. Also, this Wednesday, we're going to be having a group-wide Zoom call. So if you want in, message us. We'll be posting everything on our social media pages, the codes and things you'll need to get in. But we look forward to seeing you Wednesday. Have a good rest of your day.